Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Rob. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for doing this for us. Welcome to the Boston Buddies. We've got Vince up in Philadelphia and you in the capital city down in Canberra. Welcome.
Good morning. Good day, everyone.
It's a great pleasure to have you here, Deek. It really is.
Oh, thanks, Michael. And nice to meet you, Vince. And congratulations on your group. Michael's been telling me a few things about what you've been doing, and wonderful to share the love. Hey.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we've got a couple of runners actually from Australia, even some from your project. Zibian is one of our runners.
Oh, okay. Oh, Zib. Yeah.
He ran a couple of years ago in Boston. Yeah.
He sure did. In that wet one.
Yes. Yeah. That was a tough one, but he made it through it. If he can make it through that, he can make it through anything.
Yeah. He's one tough young man.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
No worries at all. Pleasure.
Yeah, he'd have to be tough to get through 2018, that's for sure. I mean, that was a test, and if we look at Zib's background, my goodness, that couldn't be further removed from the normal weather pattern that Zib would have had, I would have thought, Deek.
Well, yeah, he comes from a tiny little isolated Aboriginal community right in the middle of Australia, where it's an area they call the APY lands, which is basically just desert, red dirt and rocks. And his community is about 300 people. And he's about an 8 or 9 hour drive north of Adelaide, and about a 5 or 6 hour drive south of Alice Springs. So it's very isolated, very remote. And he tried out 5 years in a row for the IMP program before he finally got in, and he's still only 24 or something. So he's been working in health, in the clinic in his community. They have massive incidents of chronic disease, diabetes and heart disease and renal failure. And he works in the clinic. He's now, last year, he completed his nurse practitioner degree, and this year he started on a course of medicine. So he's relocated from Mimily, his little community, to Perth, and starting a long journey, because he's got to do a science degree first, and then he'll go on and do medicine after that. But obviously, with the pandemic, he's moved back to Mimily, and all of the Aboriginal communities are isolated and on lockdown, so no one's allowed in or out. So he's working back in the clinic there, trying to support his people, and he's still running. You'll still, if you're following him on Facebook or on Strava, you'll see him, sort of getting out and doing his runs, and he's doing little training groups and running groups with the kids in the community. So he's an amazing young fella, and it's wonderful to be able to take some of our amazing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people to events like Boston, and show them the world of marathon and the family of marathoners. And we all have we all share this incredible common connection of struggle and accomplishment, and they really go hand in hand. The struggle and the endurance. We are endurance runners, and the sense of accomplishment and achievement that comes from crossing the finish line or achieving the goal you set out for. It really fuels that self-worth and that self-belief, and that confidence and courage for you to go on and do other big things in your life. And that's what we've seen, through the foundation. We've got nearly 100 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island men and women now who've completed major international marathons and become our graduates. And like Zibby, and we have a saying, it's the finish line, your marathon finish line is just your start line. So it's what we do with them once they've actually crossed the finish line, which is the most important thing. So, we work very hard as a charity and as a foundation to provide them with scholarships and grants, and support their own little projects, like Zibian going on and doing medicine. He's one of very few Aboriginal Australians who will, I'm sure, eventually complete that marathon, which is going to take a number of years for him to get to.
Deek, none of that surprises me coming out of the foundation. And let's talk a little bit more about the foundation if we can. I know you did something special in Boston, but we'll talk about that later, because the legacy that you're leaving through the Indigenous Marathon Foundation is incredible. How did it start? Where did the idea come from? So what was it that actually you went, I think I can help here?
Well, look, I mean, my background, other than running marathons, has always been in health and health promotion and prevention. And, you know, I've always believed that prevention is better than cure. You know, if you can stop people getting sick, that's a much better social and economic situation, rather than, you know, sort of just treating them once they are sick and then trying to manage their disease or their illnesses. You know, I've done a lot of work in health promotion and prevention, and you know, chaired the ACT Health Promotion Board for about 8 years, and then, you know, sort of so it was very conscious and aware of the chronic disease and the statistics with our First Nations people. You know, there's nearly a decade difference in life expectancy between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, and the you know, sort of all of the other incarceration and suicide and you know, domestic and family violence, and all of those behaviours, unfortunately, are on the dark side, on the negative, the deficit side of the line for our First Nations people. But like a lot of Australians, I didn't know how I could do anything, and felt fairly powerless. You know, you sort of you see these issues and you see so many stories in the media, and it you know, it hits you in the heart, but you don't know what you can do. And then, you know, sort of in 2009, this guy contacted me from Sydney. He was an advertising film or advertising producer. He had a company that produced a whole range of major advertisements, but his passion was to do a documentary. His dream was always to do a major documentary, and he proposed a question to me. He said, you know, do you think Aboriginal men can run like the African men? And it was a really interesting question, you know, because in Australia we have so much success with our First Nations people in sport, in all of our football codes and basketball, and you have, you know, people like Kathy Freeman in athletics, and tennis, and all of these areas. You know, Ash Barty is Indigenous, but we've never had an endurance athlete. But obviously the backgrounds to our First Nations people have been hunters and gatherers and travelling the country on foot, are very similar to some of the African background. So it raises the question: is, you know, is that endurance a gene, or is that endurance ability and talent somehow in there, and has just never been given an opportunity to be released? Because distance running and endurance sports take years and years to develop that talent. You know, it doesn't matter how much potential you have as a distance runner. If you don't do the training, then you'll never realise that talent. So the question was, you know, maybe there's just never been the opportunity for Indigenous Australians to get out and do the training over a number of years to develop that talent. So, you know, we started on a journey, and for me, you know, as a white Australian, non-Indigenous Australian, it was the first time I'd actually really been confronted with the statistics. And I saw face to face, as we travelled around some of the remote communities, I saw the I saw the chronic disease, I saw the grog, I saw the violence and stuff face to face. And it, you know, as an Australian who's been so proud of what what I and our country have done, it really shook me to the core, and I couldn't reconcile how I could stand on the victory dais at the World Champion in Helsinki, or finish the Boston Marathon, or do these incredible things for our country, but then to have such a dark blight on our nation. And so, you know, I saw that, but the thing that upset me the most was that there was a culture of hopelessness, and a culture of unworthiness, and a culture of believing that they were second rate, that they had no value and they had no self-respect. And that, you know, if you believe that you're worthless and you have no value, you'll never make an effort to do anything which is of significance and worthwhile, because everything worthwhile is hard. You know, you've got to work hard to achieve anything. And so, you know, I worked back in 2010 with 4 Aboriginal men, and took them on that journey, and over that period of about 9 months, got them to New York. And over that period, I saw things that, as I said, made me ashamed. But when I stood on the finish line in Central Park, I saw these 4 men who so many people had written them off, saying that they'll never finish a marathon. You'll never get them to train. You'll never get them to turn up and do this thing. And they all finished, and they were on the finish line, having run further. You know, only one had ever run 30 kilometres in the lead up. The others hadn't run more than half marathon, and one hadn't done more than 10K, and they all finished, and they were all driven by a sense of responsibility that they were representing their families and their people. And that drive forced them to keep on putting one foot in front of the other, and eventually they crossed the finish line. And that sense of accomplishment and that sense of pride, they were jumping with joy after having run 42K, and physically exhausted, but emotionally so proud. And then the realization hit me that rather than trying to find the next Olympic runner, there was an opportunity to use the marathon and use running to not only promote a healthy lifestyle, which, you know, running obviously does, but to heal the broken spirit of our First Nations people by giving them an opportunity to achieve something that is really, really hard. And that's why we select a group now. You know, we're selecting, normally we select 6 men and 6 women, 18 to 30-year-olds. And in 6 months, they go from virtually no running to running their first marathon. This year, under the COVID environment, we're actually selecting 10 men and 10 women. And a lot of their education is a compulsory education. They do a certificate in sport and recreation. They do a mental health and CPR, first aid certificates. There's a whole host that come out of it with coaching accreditation, and then they go back to their communities and use that sense of respect and pride and self-belief and courage to promote more running and physical activity and walking groups and organise fun runs, and then obviously go on to do other things with their careers and in their lives to address the issues that they're really passionate about. So, you know, some of them come from, all of them come from some sort of personal struggle, some tragedies, and some, you know, when they tell you their backgrounds and their stories, they break your heart. But they also tell them, and they use those struggles as a sense of realization of how strong they are, and struggle, you know, adversity, just like a hard training session, it can put you on your knees, but it can also, once you've recovered from it, make you stronger. And we use those tough situations that our runners have been through to make them stronger, and to give them that self-belief and realization that they can change their world for themselves and for their families and for their communities and for their people. And for me, as a white fella, I see our First Nations people and our First Nations culture as a national treasure. We in Australia are so privileged to have Aboriginal culture that is the oldest living culture on the planet, oldest continuous living culture. And all we hear about in the media is the negative. All we hear about is the gap between life expectancy and all the other statistics. And as a nation, we need to celebrate the achievements and the strength and the resilience so that all Australia embraces our Indigenous culture as a national treasure that we see as a proud part of our identity of who we are as Australians. And I want to, sort of provide the platform, the opportunity for these amazing young Indigenous people to step up and show themselves and show their families and show the world what amazing people they are. And like, Vince, you meeting Zibian and hearing Zibian's story, it's an opportunity for those amazing young people to showcase themselves and hopefully through that inspire their people, but also heal that broken spirit that they have, which is an unfortunate consequence of the last 250 years of European settlement on this continent.
Yeah, that's just a pretty amazing story that you have there. I mean, you went from being just a professional runner, to turning that into actually a movement within your country. That's impressive, very impressive. And there's actually a documentary too, right? Running to America that was filmed on that first.
So that's right. Running to America was the documentary back in 2009, 2010. That this documentary producer Matt Long put together, and I narrated it, and it's an amazing story of struggle but accomplishment.
Right.
I'd encourage anyone who hasn't seen it to see if you can track it down.
Now, and the four runners were Charlie, Juan, Joseph, and Caleb.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep. And then is there going to be a follow-up to this, like the 10-year reunion in the New York Marathon?
Well, we were planning on it. Actually, just while we were talking, Charlie's just phoned me, so I'll have to give him a call back and see what he's up to. But we wanted to get the four guys back together and do another documentary 10 years on. Charlie, who was the oldest and is probably he was a bit of a leader within that group of four. He was planning on running London, and that would have been his sixth major. So we have Charlie and also our first woman who ran in 2011, Bianca Graham, who's a Torres Strait Islander, and both of them were planning on going over to London in April, and both of them would have run their sixth major. So there's not that many Australians, a couple of hundred, 200 or 300 who've done all six majors, and for us to have now two IMP graduates who are sort of lining up on their sixth major marathon is an incredible demonstration again of their accomplishment.
Rob, Annie Braden's one of our members, and she's done all six. She just recently completed that last year.
Yeah, look, it's an amazing phenomena that is relatively recent, but it's great to see now that has created this multi-marathon goal for people to get out and do.
I think we'd all like to just complete one marathon at the moment, quite frankly, let alone six. My goodness.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, Deek, how did it feel when you had the four of them across the line, that first marathon? There's a lot of pride you take when you run your own races. It doesn't really matter where you finish. But how did you feel at that finish line when the four came across the line one by one?
Oh, look, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. Because I'd shared the journey with them. over the 6 months or 9 months preceding the run. And also back then, no Aboriginal Australian had ever run a marathon, an international marathon. And when we started off on this project, I copped so much criticism and so much negative comment, and people really had a go at me saying, you're setting these guys up to fail. They'll never do it. Why are you bothering? Why you're spending all this money taking them overseas and getting them, sort of all the gear and all that sort of stuff. So, I guess I've always, like most people, probably derived a little bit of pride or satisfaction in proving people wrong. And maybe that's part of my makeup as well. As a marathon runner, there were a lot of people who said I could never run a marathon because of my physique, because I had legs like tree trunks and I was about, sort of 15 kilos heavier than my competitors. And it was always really a lot of fun, even coming back, winning Boston after, sort of a little bit disappointed with my run in Los Angeles in '84, and then a lot of people had written me off after finishing fifth in LA, and then to come back and to smash the course record and to win Boston and prove all of those negative and doubters wrong gave me a lot of pleasure. So and it was very much like that as well. And then just to see the impact. We've all been on the finish line of marathons, and you see that incredible sense of pride and accomplishment that people exude when they cross that line. And you don't know what their story is, you don't know what their background is, you don't know what their purpose or their reason for doing it. We all know that you hit the wall, and when you hit the wall, you ask yourself, why am I here? Why am I doing this? But very few of us, when we're on the finish line, know the answer to the runner's question. But I was very intimately aware of the situation that those four fellas had been through and their purpose and their drive. So when they all finished, it was a very emotional moment for me. And I've been on the finish line for every single one of our 96 graduates over the last 10 years when they finished the marathon, because from a selfish perspective, it gives me so much pleasure and so much pride to see what they're doing. So that's a little bit of an indulgence which I really try to maintain.
Well, you deserve, I would say, a lot more energy and a lot more love that's put to this than actually running and run a marathon. This is very special, and legacy lasts.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, as I said, now we're having nearly 200 applicants for those 12 positions each year, and we select them based on their purpose, on their drive, on their why. You hit the wall, and why are you here? Why do you want to keep on going? Why do you want to push through the pain? And you've got to have a bloody strong why to keep on going. And we know that through their stories and their backgrounds that they disclose through a confidential interview process that they have to have that strong why. And then, from the foundation's perspective, we also have to see in them the potential for them to change the world, to change their family, change the community. We are about creating inspirational leaders, so we have to see that hidden little gem of leadership that we can polish and make sparkle.
Now, it's Charity Wednesday page to in the US, and we have a lot of members that do a lot of work for charity. Vince is here in this, the second step in Boston. For members out there who want to further with this, there is a website, you have a page, and they can support the runs, can't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, I encourage everyone to follow us on Facebook. So if you know, Indigenous Marathon Foundation, and also through the website imf.org.au. You know, support the guys, look at their stories. There's an amazing, another amazing group. You know, we'll be announcing our 2020 20 squad in the next week or so, and doing a lot of virtual runs. People will be able to sign up to follow and join them on their virtual runs over the next 6 months. You know, who knows, hopefully towards the end of the year, we'll, you know, ideally, you know, something like New York in November might be back online. It's possible, but it's probably unlikely. It's more likely that we'll be doing internal domestic travel, and you know, ideally, if we are doing domestic travel, we might be able to do mass participation or group running events again. And if not, then, you know, we'll look to bring them in and see how we can do a small group marathon towards the end of the year if necessary. But, you know, our goal is to you know, get them to run 42K in 6 months, and we do it, you know, in 6 months because it's hard. You know, we want them to struggle, because it's only through the struggle that you find out how strong you really are and how strong your purpose and your drive is. You know, ideally, if you're running a marathon, you should take 3 or 4 years to prepare for it, because you never disrespect the marathon, because it'll hurt you if you do. But you know, we want the guys to have to dig deep and to push themselves and to hurt and struggle. And even though the physical hurt is tough, compared to the emotional struggle and the emotional hurt that they've been through, the physical pain is nothing. Because, you know, once you cross the finish line, it's going to stop.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
So let's go back a little bit. We're not going to go back to Boston just yet. We'll save that one. We've had the summer from hell in Australia. Now, of course, the coronavirus has hit the world, but we had a precursor to that with bushfires and the country burning pretty much from December. And Deek, let's go back to early 2000, because you had your own catastrophic experience around bushfires in Australia, in Stromlo. So would you like to let the members know what actually happened there? And now, and I ran it last year, the Stromlo Running Festival down at Mount Stromlo. I did the 30K trail run, loved it, very well run between yourself and Mal and Steve. But 2003 was quite a catastrophic year for you.
Yeah, look, Stromlo, for those that don't know, was a plantation pine forest on the outskirts of Canberra. And, you know, I moved from Melbourne to Canberra in the early 80s when the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport, opened, and I just finished my science degree. So I was working in the sports science lab there. And every day I do all of my training in this beautiful plantation pine forest. So, you know, and we had runners come from all over the world out here to Canberra, you know. So I had an amazing facility on my back door. And then, you know, sort of in 2003, we had a terrible bushfires here in Canberra, a firestorm that destroyed the whole plantation pine forest. It also destroyed about 400 homes, and 4 people lost their lives in those fires. And unfortunately, our home was one of the homes that was destroyed. We were down the coast, so we weren't even here when the fire came through and just destroyed everything. I lost all of my memorabilia. I lost all of my medals. And you know, the Boston, the BAA, very generously and very emotionally replaced my Boston Marathon winners medal. So again, you know, sort of that incredible international marathon and running fraternity and family. I was so grateful of the support that I received from them. But you know, because because I had a bit of a profile, I was identified or selected to go onto a bushfire recovery task force. The ACT government invited me onto a five-person recovery task force, and I sort of represented a lot of the families and the people who'd been impacted by the fires. So we worked through the process of recovery. And one of the principles that we had in that recovery, the very first meeting of the recovery task force, was this is an opportunity for us not just to replace what we had, but to actually make things better. And the chair of the task force, this fella Sandy Holway, who also chaired the Sydney Olympic Organising Committee, he said, look, each of us, if you've got one project that you would like to put on the table, this is an opportunity for you to do that, and we'll do what we can to turn that project into a reality. My project was Stromlo cross country, a running and cross country mecca. So all of the pine forest had been destroyed, and we went out there, and it was just erosion and blackberries and burnt pine trees, and pine trees don't grow back like gum trees and things. So it was just this ugly black scar. And then we worked with the ACT government to turn that area into a recreation park. And part of that recreation park is a dedicated 2.5K groomed grass cross-country circuit. And the big loop is 2.5K, and you can do 2K, 1.5K, and 1K. So 1K, 1.5, 2 or 2.5K loops around this beautiful cross-country track. So it's one of the legacy projects of those Canberra fires, and again, sort of through disaster and through tragedy, if you have the courage to believe and the capacity to make a difference, you have an obligation to make a difference. So that was something that I was very, very passionate about. And now every year we have our Stromlo Running Festival, and we do a whole series of trail runs, 50K, 30K, 10K trail runs through the pine forest, or the what was pine forest, but now is gradually growing back as eucalyptus. So there's still a bushfire abatement zone that is part of the planning of Canberra to protect the suburbs, and through those trails we now have the running festival. So the now it's called the Deek Castella cross country track, is something, again, which a bit of a legacy, and incredibly proud of being able to provide something for the community here to use. And it gets used every night. It gets used for school cross-country races, for major national cross-country championships. A whole range of events are being held out there, and there's also now over 100 kilometres of mountain bike trails and other recreation trails, and they've just built a 50-metre swimming pool out there, and so it's becoming a real hub of sport and recreation for the Canberra community. So it's great to see it continuing to grow and develop.
And look, I do recommend any of the Australian members that, given we're all these scratch races here, the Straight Running Festival, which I think there will be a number again, if I recall right. It's still in the drive. It's for everyone out and stuff for that, because it's really great event.
Yeah, look, again, sort of the website Stromlo Running Festival is definitely worth having a look at, and if you're looking to come out and do a really challenging trail run, the hills are tough, but the good thing about a hill, or the couple of good things, when you get to the top, you get a great view, and you also get a bit of downhill on the other side. So I've always loved hills. Hills make you strong, They make
Yep.
your legs strong and they make your spirit strong. And there's plenty of hills out here in Stromlo. So if anyone around Australia is looking to come in, and hopefully it'll be back online, soon. If not this year, then certainly next year.
Well, there you
Well,
go, Michael. You've got a challenge. You got to do it, Michael.
I did it last year, and I'm not proud to say, but Rob's right about those. Rob is right about those hills, because I dry retched. I overestimated my ability going up the hills, not being a very good trail runner, and I dry retched at one of the stops. So, but you're right. The view at the top is great, and getting your breath at the top is even better.
Good on you.
So let's go.
Hold on. I want to bring back something that you had mentioned, which was just something you said in passing, which I thought was just something great that maybe our listeners could help them. Where you said, if you have the capability, you have the obligation. A lot of people have the capability to go out there and help, but seeing it as an obligation is a different mindset. And that's, you've really made a difference in a lot of people's lives. I've been lucky. I've been able to interview a lot of people recently, and a lot of them have, obviously are runners. And it is amazing the amount of people who are in this running community that genuinely help other people and are selfless like yourself. So I just appreciate what you're doing. It's just amazing work.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, well, I mean, it's just the way I was brought up, and I had an amazing parents as role models, and like I said, yeah, I think when you do have an opportunity to make a difference, you have an obligation to make a difference. We're not those opportunities don't last forever, and you don't want to waste the opportunity and then look back and have any regret. So when there is an opportunity that pops up, and it's one of the things I learned after the 2003 bushfires. We went from having a beautiful house with, sort of amazing artwork and memorabilia, and we'd renovated the whole house to in just a handful of hours having nothing. And it made me realize that the most important thing in life is your health. And I, through that recovery period, I met people who had horrific burns. A young girl, a beautiful young girl who ended up spending nearly a year and a bit in a burns unit in Sydney. Lost all of the fingers, lost her hair, lost most of her facial features, and even though we lost a lot of material things, we had our health, and it made me realize how important that is, and therefore it's something you have to look after. It's health is a privilege, and it's something that you earn, and if you don't look after yourself, then very quickly you slide down the slippery slope of sedentary and obesity and junk food and all that sort of stuff. So it's really, really important to do that. And the other thing I learned is that life is unpredictable. You have no realization of what's going to happen in the next hour. And tragedy and glory can be just around the corner. Tragedy, unfortunately, hits us out of like lightning out of a clear blue sky. We have no realization and readiness for it. But we have to rely on our family and our friends to get us through, just like we did after those fires in 2003, when we had no clothing, we had no bed, we had no house, we had nothing, and relied very heavily on the love and the support of our family and friends to get us through. So, we also have an obligation, because we're family and friends to other people, to be there to support them when they're going through difficult challenges. And all of us will go through difficult challenges, whether it's marriage breakups, or whether it's illness in the family, or whatever it happens to be. Even injuries, for a runner, having a bad injury that prevents you from being able to train, is a real, when running is part of your who you are, and it's part of your mental health and your well-being. So, even in running groups, when we know someone is injured and unable to run, just giving them a little bit of a call every now and then and just seeing how they're going, are little things that we can do to be there to support others through some of those difficult times.
Right. Yeah, you can't control the tragedies that are going to happen, but you can control how you react.
Exactly.
That's the difference. Yeah.
100%. And I think we're very fortunate in some buddies that got a membership that really is about supporting and uplifting each other. And, we have our fair percentage of injured runners. I've been injured for the last 2 or 3 months and just coming back now. And the support that you get from the rest of our membership, it's just humbling. It's humbling. And again, it takes you back to that running community where it's such a beautiful community, that is for sure. So let's talk Boston. Let's go back to 1986. And I'm going to just quote a few statistics because I'm not sure people would realize this. 1986, winning time 2:07:51. An unbelievable time 34 years ago. Now, for context for everyone who's watching this, there's only 6 winners since then that have bettered that time. Only 6 Boston winners have bettered that time since 1986. This is long before we obviously had the shoe technology that's there today. And in fact, that time has not been bettered in the last 8 years. So if we think about shoe technology, nutrition, gels, the whole deal, that time hasn't been bettered since 2011 was the last time that someone ran under 2:07:51, which is astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing. So there's that, only 6. It's still the Australian marathon record. We need to improve. I'm definitely not going to be the one doing that. But Deek, I don't know what's going on, but we certainly don't seem to have the depth of marathon running that we had in your day. We had some incredible runners. You obviously drove a lot of the interest with Steve Monaghetti and Pat Carroll and others that were around at the time. But take us back to 1986. It was the first Boston Marathon of the professional era. And it was important to the history of Boston because Boston had started to fade away just a little bit in its prestige, not its history. The field didn't have the same quality that some of the other marathons were getting at the time. So it was really important for Boston. 1986 was a really crucial year for the Boston Marathon. So take us back to that day.
Yeah, well, for me personally, I mentioned before, I just was coming back from the disappointment of Los Angeles in '84. I was favourite going into LA, and like an idiot, I overtrained. I'd won the World Championship. I'd won our Commonwealth Games in '82, World Championships in '83. Was going really well. Had a really good training program, but thought, well, the Olympics is even more important. So I ran myself into a hole and really struggled. So coming off Los Angeles, I wanted to get back up there. I still believed that I could run fast. And then Boston contacted me. This Pat Lynch, who became a very good friend, who was the elite race coordinator, the elite runners. And I ended up having a meeting with David D'Alessandro, who was vice president of John Hancock. And Hancock had just come on to sponsor the run. And they were still, I was still tossing and turning as to whether to go and do it, because back then Boston didn't really make an effort to look after the top runners. We were all professional runners. We needed our prize money, we needed our appearance money to be able to cover our lives and our careers as professional athletes. And Boston was probably one of the slower events to come into the modern era. Which is part of the beauty of the tradition that the event has. So it was hanging on to that. D'Alessandro met with me and told me that, they wanted to support the event. And I said to him, look, I'm not really interested in just supporting you to sell life insurance as a advertising campaign. I said, if you're interested in working with us to re-establish Boston as the premier marathon in the world, and that's something which is not going to happen just in 1 or 2 years. It's something which is going to take a while to achieve. Then I'm interested in coming in and being part of the event. So he agreed, and he acknowledged that this was going to be a long-term commitment that Hancock had to the event. And then we came over in '86 and ran, and we had a number of meals with David and with Pat Lynch and others. And I remember the night before the marathon, we had dinner with D'Alessandro and Pat Lynch, and I had a beer. And David said to Pat told me afterwards, he said, after we had dinner, I can't believe that, we've paid Deek Castella all this money to come over and run our event, and he's not even taking it seriously. He's having a beer the night before the race. And Pat Lynch said, don't be silly, he's an Australian.
It's my kind of runner.
That's right. So anyway, I went on and had that great run in '86, and then and I'm so proud to see that Hancock are still so heavily involved in Boston. After that '86 marathon, they got involved in Chicago and Los Angeles and a number of other major marathons as well. But I think most of those maybe they've pulled back from. But their commitment to Boston, obviously, because of the grassroots connection that they have in the Boston community, has really continued. And my connection with the BAA and Gloria Ratti and the whole team there is so close. I really because of things, it goes beyond just running. It goes beyond just the lining up on the starting line and the tradition and the history of Boston and the way that they responded after the Canberra bushfires here with me and my family, really means a lot to me. And Boston is a very special marathon, and the BAA and the people involved in the Boston Marathon are a very special group of people. So I think as a sport, we're very, very lucky to have a group of people. There aren't too many marathons out there that have a museum that records the history of their event and running, and that's just a demonstration of the role that they play in preserving the history and the tradition of the run, because that's something that we in the modern era of commercialization of sport, it's really important that we have people like the BAA and events like the Boston Marathon to keep us connected to our past.
Yeah, and a year like this, especially, having that organization behind it. Hopefully September rolls around, and who knows, maybe that'll be the first marathon of the year after all this. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
It's very addictive. I ran it for the first time 3 years ago. It was going to be one and done. I can't stop going back. It's the whole, and it's the people. It's
Wellesley for you, isn't it? It's Wellesley College. We know.
Yeah, well, the Scream Tunnel is a highlight. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. But Rob, you were probably going too fast to even know the Scream Tunnel was there. You couldn't even make it a nail-biting finish for the cameras. You blitzed that field in '86. You left them behind like no one else.
Yeah, look, I was in great shape, and it was just one of those dream runs where I broke away from the rest of the field before halfway, and I was racing the timing clock. I had the lead vehicle in front of me, and every mile was ticking up the split. And my goal was to try to keep every mile under 5 minutes. So I was just racing, just 1 mile after another, trying to make sure, even over the hills, pushing really, really hard, just with the confidence that I'd be able to hold it together and keep on going to the finish line. And it was just one of those really special runs for me.
And for the international audience watching this, we Australians can be lazy things. There's no doubt about that. It takes a little bit to get us out of bed, but the international athletes that were running overseas, Deek was one of the individuals that would get Australians out of bed. If it was on TV and it was overnight, then we'd get up and we'd watch. It really was a golden era for endurance running for Australians that we haven't seen since. Unfortunately, we haven't. We've had success on track and field, but not to the same degree. So, Deek, you did manage to get us out of bed. Let's talk a little bit. We've got about 10 minutes left. Shoe technology. It's often discussed. We've seen the new Alpha Flies from Nike released, and then no one's running them because no one's running, basically. But I'm really interested in your views on the way the shoe technology has developed over the last few years. Given, if we go back 34 years ago, I'd be interested to understand what you were running in to start with. And my goodness, with some of the technology today, if that had been available back then, what would that have done?
Yeah, look, it's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I'm all for technology. My science background, and I love things like Strava and smart watches, and the ability to be able to use that. I guess even with regard to watches and wearables and stuff, I'm not a fan of when the tail wags the dog sort of thing. I love the simplicity and the beauty of running. The way that you can just get out there in the bush and you can run through the country, and I love, my origins were not so much on the track but more cross country. World cross country, an amazing event from a running perspective. And so I love the origins of running, things like the Born to Run story and everything. But then I also like to be able to tap into whatever tools are available to make it better and to minimize injury and to make it more enjoyable and help us motivate ourselves, because running is really hard. Training every day consistently, getting out, doing the hard hill sessions and the long runs and stuff is really tough. So if we can find a way to make it a little bit easier, then I'm all for it. But I guess with the shoe technology, I don't think I have a major problem with the technology per se. My issue is probably in terms of a level playing field, and I'm not a fan of the technology being patented and therefore unavailable to other athletes who maybe don't run for Nike. I'm sure eventually those other companies will come up with ways around the patents and to come up with similar sorts of benefits that can be provided to the athlete. But at the moment, it's not really, from an elite runner's perspective, fair to allow a select group of athletes to use technology that isn't available to everyone. From a mass participation, like if you can find a pair of shoes that is going to make you help you to run faster, go for it. You train hard, and if you're prepared to spend the $200 or $300 or whatever it is on a pair of shoes that get you through a couple of marathons, and you run a PB, that's just sort of, I think, technology in progressing along, and I don't think we can hold it back. I guess I'm just more concerned about the unfair advantage that the elite runners might have when it's not available to everyone. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yep, no, that makes sense. I think we have to change with the times, but it's still, like I said to somebody else, it's not going to make me a 2:12 marathoner, no matter what those shoes do. It doesn't matter.
No, yeah, and it's you know, I was talking to Steve Monaghetti a while ago, and he's he's sponsored by Nike, and I said, mate, what is it with these shoes? And he said, yeah, he said I've worn them and I hate running in them, but I run 2 seconds a kilometre faster. So there's no doubt that they're advantageous,
right.
But it's a very different feel, and there needs to be some way that the rules limit the technology. So running with springs on your feet is ridiculous. We are runners. We're not into pogo sticks and bouncing down the road with springs strapped to our feet. So we have to maintain some connection to the simplicity and the beauty of what running stands for and what it represents. But then if there is technology out there that reduces injury or helps you to run a little bit faster, and you can afford it, then go for it.
Yeah, we had Tom Derderian on the other day, and he was talking about the studies that he was doing when he was at Nike, and how your running economy or your VO2 max would change based off of the shoes that you were wearing. They were finding, like, at a certain point, shoes would actually become, like, the harder it was, the worse off it was. Then as they got more cushioned, it leveled off, and then if they got too cushioned, your running economy got worse again. So it's kind of like they needed to find a middle of the road there with the cushioning to allow you to actually to have the benefits of it, because too much is actually just as bad as too little.
Yeah, absolutely. Running with pillows, sort of strapped to your feet where you're wobbling all over the place is not an efficient way to transfer energy. But running with steel plates on your feet, or sort of the whole barefoot running phenomena, has led to a lot of injuries. So somewhere in between there, we can provide the stability and the support, but also the rebound that we need to be able to propel ourselves forward in the most efficient way.
Right.
Yeah, and I think and I think perhaps that perfect mix hasn't been found. Because I think over the running groups, there are questions around injuries that are coming out of some of these shoes. People are not quite sure why they've suddenly got an Achilles injury or a calf injury. The natural assumption could be it's the shoe. People are not quite sure, but I would think definitely there's some play on the shoe causing some injuries for some people. They're just not quite right for everybody.
Yeah, look, I mean, absolutely. I mean, your body adapts to the equipment that you're using or the shoes that you're using, and it's always been one of the frustrations is that when you do find a shoe that you love, within a year or two, the shoe companies dropped it and they're doing a new shoe. So it's, so I've known a lot of runners that have gone out when they find a shoe that they love wearing, they'll buy 10 pairs and put them away so that they can draw them down as needed. But sort of your body does absolutely accommodate it and respond to the shoes and the ground and the surface and all that sort of stuff. So you need to have a fair bit of complexity or variation in terms of the surface that you run on. If you always just run on grass and then all of a sudden you go in a road race, you're going to have issues. So mixing up the surface, mixing up the terrain, that stimulates the physiological response that you need to get from a training perspective. And if you've never worn sort of the Vaporflies or whatever it is, and then you put them on and you go out and you smash yourself, then certainly I can understand how you can increase your risk of getting injured quite significantly.
Yeah. So Deek, we're our hour's up. We're going to have to wrap up and let you get on with your day. Any final messages or thoughts you'd like to leave with the members of the group?
Oh, look, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of ground, which has been really, really good, and it's nice for me. So thank you for the opportunity of sharing a little bit of my history and my philosophies and my beliefs. I'd just like to acknowledge all marathon runners. The marathon is a mystique and a wonderful thing to do, and all of us who have done them know how hard they are. So the incredible fraternity and the friendship and the acknowledgement that we have with all other marathon runners is something really special and unique. And it doesn't matter whether you're running 2 hours 7 or 5 hours 7, you've still covered the 42.195 or 26 miles, 385 yards, and you're part of a really special fraternity who have deliberately gone to the starting line of something that they know is going to be hard. And there's not too many times in our life where we go somewhere deliberately knowing that we're going to hurt. But the sense of accomplishment and achievement is proportional to the struggle. In our foundation, we have a saying, a little mantra, that the harder the struggle, the greater the reward. And all of us who do marathons deliberately choose to do something that is going to test us. It's going to test our body. It's going to test our mind and our ability to train properly. And it's going to, most of all, test our spirit and our commitment and our resolve. I just want to recognise and acknowledge everyone who has done a marathon. Also, everyone who has the courage to want to do a marathon and to do the preparation. And for those, I'd just like to again reinforce that never disrespect the marathon. Never think it's going to just be something just because you've been down to a marathon and you've seen people out there of all shapes and sizes doing it. You should never disrespect it, and you should always honour the tradition and the history that started off with Pheidippides in 490 BC. And it's always nice for us to remember the history of our sport and the history of our events such as Boston, because it puts all of our efforts and our struggles and our achievements in some sort of context. Thanks for the opportunity to have a chat. I really look forward to getting back to Boston and catching up with a lot of the members. We, as I said, have a wonderful fraternity and friendship. So, I'm more than happy to touch base and also, again, just really encourage people to support the foundation, just either by following the page and being inspired by a lot of the stories out there. And in Australia, for us to celebrate our beautiful, rich Indigenous culture that we have in this country, and to see it as part of our national treasure and our identity of who we are as Australians.
Wow, thank you, Deek. And I can tell you, and Vince will back this up, as we all get back together in Boston, there will be a beer on the bar waiting for you.
That sounds good.
Don't be late, because I know at least a dozen of the members who will drink it if it sits there for longer than 5 seconds, but there will be a beer for you waiting for you on behalf. Thank you very much for your time. It's been brilliant.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah. Thanks, Vince. All the best. We'll look forward to seeing you down the road.
Cheers.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Bye-bye.